Assalamu alaikum, Sadiq. Just want to do a mic check. You can hear me, correct?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So we'll get started probably in about, let's say, 7, 8 minutes. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. We'll get started with our program for tonight, inshallah, commemorating the 10th of Shohoda Karbala. We'll get started with Surah Yasin, recited by Sadiq Premji, followed by, inshallah, Marcia by Sayyid John Riaz, followed by Majlis, Matam by Malim Hussein Bandali, and then, inshallah, conclude with Ziyarat. So, Sadiq, if you're ready, just give me 1 second and then you can get started, okay? Okay, go ahead, Sadiq, bismillah.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ياسين والقرآن الحكيم إنك لمن المرسلين على صراط مستقيم تنزيل العزيز الرحيم لتنذر قوما ما أنذر آباؤهم فهم غافلون لقد حق القول على أكثرهم فهم لا يؤمنون إنا جعلنا في أعناقهم أغلالا فهي إلى الأذقان فهم مقمحون وجعلنا من بين أيديهم سدا ومن خلفهم سدا فأغشيناهم فهم لا يبصرون وسواء عليهم أأنذرتهم أم لم تنذرهم لا يؤمنون إنما تنذر من اتبع الذكر وخشي الرحمن بالغيب فبشره بمغفرة وأجر كريم إنا نحن نحيي الموتى ونكتب ما قدموا وآثارهم وكل شيء أحصيناه في إمام مبين واضرب لهم مثلا أصحاب القرية إذ جاءها المرسلون إذ أرسلنا إليهم اثنين فكذبوهما فعززنا بثالث فقالوا إنا إليكم مرسلون قالوا ما أنتم إلا بشر مثلنا وما أنزل الرحمن من شيء إن أنتم إلا تكذبون قالوا ربنا يعلم إنا إليكم لمرسلون وما علينا إلا البلاغ المبين قالوا إنا تطيرنا بكم لئن لم تنتهوا لنرجمنكم وليمسنكم منا عذاب أليم قالوا طائركم معكم أئن ذكرتم بل أنتم قوم مسرفون وجاء من أقصى المدينة رجل يسعى قال يا قوم اتبعوا المرسلين اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون وما لي لا أعبد الذي فطرني وإليه ترجعون أتخذ من دونه آلهة إن يردني الرحمن بضر لا تغني عني شفاعتهم شيئا ولا ينقذون إني إذا لفي ضلال مبين إني آمنت بربكم فاسمعون قيل ادخلوا الجنة قال يا ليت قومي يعلمون بما غفر لي ربي وجعلني من المكرمين وما أنزلنا على قومه من بعده من جند من السماء وما كنا منزلين إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم خامدون يا حسرة على العباد ما يأتيهم من رسول إلا كانوا به يستهزئون ألم يروا كم أهلكنا قبلهم من القرون أنهم إليهم لا يرجعون وإن كل لما جميع لدينا محضرون وآية لهم الأرض ميتة أحييناها وأخرجنا منها حبا فمنه يأكلون وجعلنا فيها جنات من نخيل وعناب وفجرنا فيها من العيون ليأكلوا من ثمره وما عملته أيديهم أفلا يشكرون سبحان الذي خلق الأزواج كلها مما تنبت الأرض ومن أنفسهم ومما لا يعلمون وآية لهم الليل نسلخ منه النهار فإذا هم مظلمون والشمس تجري لمستقر له ذلك تقدير العزيز العليم والقمر قدرناه منازل حتى عاد كالأرجون القديم لا شمس ينبغي لها أن تدرك القمر ولا الليل سابق النهار وكل في فلك يسبحون وآية لهم أنا حملنا ذريتهم في الفلك المشحون وخلقنا لهم من مثله ما يركبون وإن نشأ نغرقهم فلا صريخ لهم ولا هم ينقذون إلا رحمة منا ومتاعا إلى حين وإذا قيل لهم اتقوا ما بين أيديكم وما خلفكم لعلهم ترحمون وما تأتيهم من آية من آيات ربهم إلا كانوا عنها معرضين وإذا قيل لهم أنفقوا مما رزقكم الله قال الذين كفروا للذين آمنوا أنطعم من لو يشاء الله أطعمه إن أنتم إلا في ضلال مبين ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين ما ينظرون إلا صيحة واحدة تأخذهم وهم يخصمون فلا يستطيعون توصية ولا إلى أهلهم يرجعون ونفخ في السور فإذا هم من الأجداث إلى ربهم ينسلون قالوا يا ويلنا من بعثنا من مرقدنا هذا ما وعد الرحمن وصدق المرسلون إن كانت إلا صيحة واحدة فإذا هم جميع لدينا مهدرون فاليوم لا تظلم نفس شيئا ولا تجزون إلا ما كنتم تعملون إن أصحاب الجنة اليوم في شغل فاكهون هم وأزواجهم في الظلال على الأرائك متكئون لهم فيها فاكهة ولهم ما يدعون سلام قولا من رب رحيم وامتازوا اليوم أيها المجرمون ألم أعهد إليكم يا بني آدم ألا تعبدوا الشيطان إنه لكم عدو مبين وأن يعبدوني هذا صراط مستقيم ولقد أضل منكم جبلا كثيرا أفلم تكونوا تعقلون هذه جهنم التي كنتم توعدون اصلوها اليوم بما كنتم تكفرون اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم وتشهد أرجلهم بما كانوا يكسبون ولو نشاء لطمسنا على أعينهم فاستبقوا الصراط فأنى يبصرون ولو نشاء لمسخناهم على مكانتهم فما استطاعوا مضيا ولا يرجعون ومن نؤمره ننكسه في الخلق أفلا يعقلون وما علمناه الشعر وما ينبغي له إن هو إلا ذكر وقرآن مبين لينذر من كان حيا ويحق القول على الكافرين أولم يروا أنا خلقناهم مما عملت أيدينا أنعاما فهم لها مالكون وظللناها لهم فمنها ركوبهم ومنها يأكلون ولهم فيها منافع ومشارب أفلا يشكرون واتخذوا من دون الله آلهة لعلهم ينصرون لا يستطيعون نصرهم وهم لهم جند مهدرون فلا يحزنك قولهم إنا نعلم ما يسرون وما يعلنون أولم يرى الإنسان أنا خلقناه من نطفة فإذا هو خصيم مبين وضرب لنا مثلا ونسي خلقه قال من يحيي العظام وهي رميم قل يحييها الذي أنشأها أول مرة وهو بكل خلق عليم الذي جعل لكم من الشجر الأخضر نارا فإذا أنتم منه توقدون أوليس الذي خلق السماوات والأرض بقادر على أن يخلق مثلهم بلى وهو الخلاق العليم إنما أمره وإذ أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون فسبحان الذي بيده ملكوت كل شيء وإليه ترجعون.
Good job, Sadiq, mashallah. Surah Al-Mubarak al-Fatiha. John, bismillah.
درود بر محمد و آل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
فاتحہ. پردیس میں زینب کھو بیٹھی 18 برس کے پالے کو روتے ہیں کھڑے سب آل نبی روتے ہیں کھڑے سب آل نبی 18 برس کے پالے کو ارمان نہ نکلا پانوں کا ہے لاش پہ نوحہ بانوں کا پائیں گی کہاں یہ کوک جلی پائے گی کہاں یہ کوک جلی 18 برس کے پالے کو دل تھام کے اکبر کی مادر سرور سے کہتی ہے رو کر کھو آئے کہاں اے ابن علی کھو آئے کہاں اے ابن علی 18 برس کے پالے کو نازوں سے مرادوں سے پالا شادی का जमाना जब आया मैदान में खो कर बैठ गई मैदान में खो कर बैठ गई 18 बरस के पाले को किस्मत का करूं किससे मैं गिला खिदमत के अवस कुछ भी न मिला सहरा बिना ज़ैनब बांध सकी सहरा बिना ज़ैनब बांध सकी 18 बरस के पाले को परदेस में ज़ैनब सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मोहम्मद व आले मोहम्मद
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Ahsan, thank you.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وفوضوا أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير. والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيت الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. اللهم صل على محمد. وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الله نور السماوات والأرض صدق الله العلي العظيم. زينوا مجالسكم بالصلوات على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: why does evil exist? And why does it happen to me? Keep this question in the back of your mind. I want to start with a scenario. Imagine for a moment that a Christian man enters into a church, and at the same time, simultaneously, a Jewish man enters into a synagogue, or a Muslim man enters into a mosque, for example. On one paradigm, you have the Christian man entering into the church, and at the same time, in a different place, you have the Jewish person entering the synagogue, or a Muslim entering the mosque. That person who is Christian may remove what is on their head out of respect of the institution. They may have a cap, a hat on their head, and they enter into the church removing that cap from their head. At the same time, a Jewish person or a Muslim person enter into their house of worship placing a cap or a hat on their head. If you ask both parties why it is that you are doing this, why is one removing the hat? Why is one placing the hat on the head? You will ask them and they will say it's out of respect. Out of respect. But one's removing, one's placing. Therefore, we realize that paradigms differ based on how you view the world. If I wear red glasses, rose-colored glasses, I see a rose-colored world. If I wear green lensed glasses, I will see a green lensed world. Therefore, our topic of discussion tonight is the question of evil. Why does evil exist? This is a particular question at the macro level, the high level, and particular at the micro level. Why does it happen to me? First of all, why does it exist in the first place? And second of all, if it does exist, then why does it happen to me? This macro question with respect to why evil exists has been one of the main causes of people leaving religion in the West. Many people, thousands of people, millions of people throughout history have said that I don't believe in religion because evil exists. Therefore, we must look at this question and identify why it is that the person who's looking at this question and saying that because evil exists, therefore I don't believe. Is this a question that is particular to a particular part of the world, or is this a question that is universal in nature? Therefore, tonight I want to look at our first aspect, which is the definition of evil. What is evil? Then I want to look at what is this conundrum that has occurred about evil and its existence and its relationship to God. What does this factor of evil have to do with God? And why has it left people to believe the belief in God? Then I want to look at what are other Eastern religions saying with respect to this question. Is this a Western phenomenon? Is this an Eastern phenomenon? And if we look at it, how can we understand it better based on the lens in which we're looking at it? Then I want to look at what does Islam say about this subject, about this matter? And then what it is that the prophets of Ahlul Bayt and the prophets of Islam have looked at with respect to this. Finally, I want to ask the question, were the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam on the plains of Karbala asking this question? And what was their viewpoint on this question? Did it lead them to leave religion, or did it cause them to get closer to faith? This is the objective for tonight's discussion, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first point being, what is the definition of evil? Evil, one may argue, for example, if I look at it from a religious framework, somebody may say drinking wine or drinking alcohol. If I ask a Muslim, they may say that drinking wine or drinking alcohol, this is something that's evil. This is not the evil that we're talking about, because this is relative evil. The Muslim may say this is bad. The Christian will say this is not bad to me. That's why if you look at the history of Muslim civilizations, especially those who are calling, for example, Islamophobia, and those people who are saying Islam and Sharia law are all problematic, I invite them to look at the history of Muslim civilizations. The Ottomans, the Persians, you will find that there were wineries in their localities in the Ottoman Empire as well as in the Persian Empire. These were Muslim civilizations, but they did not impose their view upon Christians and Jews and other people who are living under their state. Therefore, it's a fallacy to say that Islam wants to impose its view on everyone else. We must understand where we come from a historic aspect. Therefore, we're not talking about relative evil. When we say evil in this context, we are referring to suffering. Why does that child who's only 4 or 5 years old have to go through cancer? Why do I have to lose my spouse? Why do I have to lose my child? Why do I have to lose my parents? Why me? Why does suffering take place? This is the question that we want to look at. With respect to Western philosophy, when this question is looked at, the idea comes forward that how is it possible that a God that has certain characteristics where he is omnipotent, he is omniscient, and he is omnibenevolent, at the same time this God can allow evil to exist? We must first define terms. I implore you in the few moments that we have together, this will be a bit intellectually dense in terms of the discussion. And the reality is, this is something that we must define, because we are finding many of our young ones and our next generation leaving faith because these dense questions have not been answered. Therefore, we must look at it and understand, what does omnipotent mean? Omni meaning all, potent meaning strength. Omnipotent, all strength and all powerful God. Omniscient, all knowing God. And furthermore, omnibenevolent, an all benevolent, an all merciful God. How can a God that's all powerful, all knowing, and all merciful and all good allow that child to suffer? How can a God who has these attributes allow there to be poverty in society? How can a God like this allow people to starve? How can this happen on his watch? This is how the question is framed, and this is something the likes of Einstein and many others suffered with this question. They couldn't reconcile. Do you know what the reality of this question is? If you ask the experts of religion, they will tell you that this is a phenomenon that leads people to leave religion. This question of an omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent God and evil existing is a question that leads people to leave religion only in the West. It doesn't happen in the East. Remember the example that I gave at the beginning. The Jew enters the synagogue, the Muslim enters into the mosque, and the Christian enters into their church. Christian removes his hat. The Jew puts on a cap, a yarmulke, when he enters into the synagogue. A Muslim puts on the kufi cap when he enters into the masjid. They both want to show respect. One, it leads them closer to God. With respect to this question of evil, evil existing leads someone to leave religion. And in the Eastern philosophy, it leads people to get closer. What happens? In Western philosophy, meaning America, Canada, UK, these countries, Europe, the statement comes forward like this. There is a God who has all these attributes that I just defined, all powerful, all knowing, and all good, and yet evil exists. God created the universe. He knew that all of these traits are going to be there, yet he created it. He is evil. That's how the narrative goes. In Eastern philosophy, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Hinduism, whether it's Islam, the narrative is very different. What's the narrative within these other faiths? The narrative, for example, within Buddhism is life is suffering. Life will entail suffering. Whereas in our life that we're told many times in the West is that life is all good, life is all roses, and therefore we will benefit from life at every aspect at every turn. But then we get disappointed. We lose to a loved one. We have a loss in our business. Then we say, oh, life was supposed to be amazing. Why am I suffering? Whereas in Buddhism, they said, no, the whole idea is life is suffering and you must get used to it. The Bhagavad Gita of the Hindus, the whole narrative takes place on the battlefield. The idea is life will have these difficulties. Within Islam, it was the same concept, that life and trials and tribulations are intertwined. Here's how the narrative goes in Eastern philosophy. This is why it doesn't exist. God is all good. God created the universe. But creation implies separation. Please bear with me in this very delicate discussion. Creation implies separation. If I create this mimbar is a creation of mine. This mimbar is not me. This mimbar will not have the attributes of me. It has its own attributes. It has a certain weight, it has certain length, it has certain width. But that length, that width is not me. I'm the creator of the mimbar in this example. This is what's happened in the West. Creation and the creator have been conflated, one on the other. The created and the creation is the same. In Eastern philosophy, no. The idea is that there is a separation between the creator and the created. Creation implies separation. God created the universe. Therefore, if God created the universe, this universe will not be all good like God. There will be separation. That separation between God and the creation, that universe, that separation manifests itself on the human plane as evil. Allow me to explain through an example. There was a book written roughly 100 years ago called Flatland. Imagine for a moment you are in a two-dimensional world. Do you understand what I mean when I say two-dimensional world? A flat plane. For our young ones, you may remember your video games that you used to play. For example, Super Mario and the likes that were two-dimensional in nature. For those who may be a bit older, you'll remember Tetris. The game that you used to play on that, it was two-dimensional in nature. We live in a three-dimensional world. Imagine for a moment, in this world that is two dimensions, I place my three-dimensional finger in that wall through a two-dimensional world. What will a person who is in a two-dimensional world see when I place my finger through their world? What will they see? My finger is three-dimensional. Their world is two-dimensional. When I place my finger through their world, what will they see? They will see a flesh-colored line, ahsantum. All they will see is a line. They will not see my finger. And let's say they give that line a name. They say that line, you take one of the pillars of this beautiful masjid, let's say that pillar right there. And the person says, I can only see a flesh-colored line. I'm going to name that something. The name I'm giving it is evil. Science has already showed us that our world and our universe in mathematics has multiple dimensions, either 9 or 11 or 13 in string theory. Meaning what? Meaning that when I am looking at my world, I only know a three-dimensional world. That creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who we would call God Almighty, who is omniscient, omnibenevolent, and omnipotent, who has all power, all knowledge, and all mercy, he knows the complete picture. And people who grow up or live in a Buddhist society, Hindu society, or Muslim society understand that this world is separation from God. Therefore, this world will not be all roses. Whereas the philosophy now is coming forward that people understand that, oh, hold on a minute. I was told a wrong picture in Western philosophy. I was told everything's supposed to be beautiful. And this same question about why the child has cancer, why there's famine, the whole framework changes. With respect to our belief system, with respect to our understanding in Islam, with respect to evil, the Quran al-Majid or Furqan al-Hamid uses two terms in particular. With respect to what is evil, one is that which is the word shar. Min sharr al-waswas al-khannas. Shar is the opposite of khair, for example. That is evil that is created by man. You see, the Buddhist, the Hindu, the Muslim all understand that there is an element of evil that is created by man. That child who's going hungry may not necessarily be because of God. Because remember, I want God and I want my free will as well. You see, God Almighty, I want him to intervene when things are bad, but when things are good, I still want my free will. Whereas the reality was shar is man-made evil. Evil that comes forward in the form of people controlling prices artificially so that people suffer, which happens in our world. Evil may be, for example, certain lobby groups such as the sugar lobby, paying Harvard Medical Journal millions of dollars in order to divert attention away from the negative impacts of sugar on the heart and focusing on fats, which has happened in our world. This is man-made shar, and this will exist in our world. But there is another aspect of what we may call evil, or our lack of understanding of what evil is, which is ibtila, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives a trial or a test. It's not evil, it's a test in order for us to get to ultimate salvation. Who was given this test? The prophets were given this test. The imams were given this test. For example, who? For example, Nabi Ayyub alayhi salam, who is known in the Old Testament as Job, J-O-B, Job. Nabi Ayyub alayhi salam lived 3,642 years after Adam alayhi salam. He was from the line of Nabi Lut alayhi salam. And he had a wife who was very devout to him. He had been given children, numerous children, traditions say 7 sons and daughters, and he had been given wealth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the form of sheep and cattle, and he had been given health, and he had been given everything. Shaitan has a dialogue with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and says, you have this creation of yours who's a prophet, and this creation of yours worships you and worships you and worships you, but things are very good for him. Ayyub, Job, he has wealth, he has a good family, he has health, he has everything you would want. Take this away from him and he'll no longer believe. He'll no longer be thankful. He'll no longer have any reverence for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came forward and said, very well, we will test him. And the test began. He lost his children. He lost his wealth, to the point that he became afflicted, that they say he got leprosy or a skin disease that took his health. When Ayyub alayhi salam himself was asked, What was the most difficult thing? He said the most difficult thing was when people began to blame me and say that I was the cause of this. Doesn't this happen sometimes? We see someone who's suffering in our community sometimes and we think this person's suffering, oh, maybe they must have done some sin. Whereas the reality is there may be a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that is allowing someone to get to Kamal. We don't know the entire divine plan. The example is, for example, you know the Mona Lisa that you find in the Louvre in Paris? This painting that's done by Leonardo da Vinci, you might have found in today's era that they'll break that up into pieces and create puzzles out of it. When they break that into pieces and create puzzles out of it, when you take an individual piece of that puzzle, you will see that it's brown or miscolored. There's no beauty there. There's no art or there's no aesthetic value in that individual piece. But when you place all the pieces together, eventually you get a beautiful picture. This is exactly the example of our understanding and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's understanding. We're looking at one piece of the puzzle. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite wisdom sees the entire picture. I remember I was looking, now coming to the question of why me? Why am I facing this? Why did I lose my loved one? Why did I lose my child? Why did I lose everyone who's important to me? Why did I lose money? Why did I have a loss in business? Why me? And sometimes we don't know the whole picture. I was listening to NPR on my way to work one day, and a very interesting story came on that I'll never forget. It was a couple, a husband and wife, who were very wealthy from New York, multi-million, very, very well off. They had a child who was born Down syndrome from birth. When this child was born Down syndrome, that journalist asked them a question. The question the journalist asked was a very courageous question that's very difficult to ask a parent that's been through challenges. And the question that the journalist asked was, if you could have this child over again 20 years ago, would you still have this child again? Now, mind you, after this child was born, this couple spent millions of dollars creating institutions throughout the tri-state area of the Northeast, making institutions for poor children, for Down syndrome poor children. They dedicated their life to this, to create institutions for them. The journalist asked, would you want that this child, if they were born again 20 years ago, you rewind the hands of time, would you want this child to be Down syndrome or not? Their response was remarkable. They said, for the sake of this child, we would never want it. We don't want our child to suffer. Our child is our child. We love our child. But they said, for our sake, we would want to do this again. For your sake, you would want to do this again? Why? They said, we feel that this child has made our hearts softer. We would not create and we would not empathize with those people who had Down syndrome children if we hadn't had one ourselves. We wouldn't create the institutions that we created had we not had this child. God in His infinite mercy realized that we needed to be part of this mission and we needed to have this child so we could use our wealth to do good in the world. We could have used that money on ourselves and squandered it on boats and yachts and houses, but we feel we've done good with our wealth. I want to say this because we are suffering, and I don't have time. I'm giving you a condensed version of what is reality. Our world is rigged to make us unhappy. There's numerous studies from Canada to the United States, coast to coast, to the United Kingdom, and throughout Europe. The biggest topic in our communities, Christian communities, Jewish communities, all communities, irrespective of faith, is mental illness. Why are people suffering? Why is anxiety so high? Why is depression so high? Why are these things so high? In another discussion, in another night, if life permits, I'll tell you all the answers as to why. But I want to give you a solution tonight to those who are asking why. Why me? Why am I going through this? Why my family? Why my loved ones? Why my relatives? Why me? Sheryl Sandberg is the second in charge at Facebook, multi-billionaire. I say this because these individuals may have certain access to certain networks that you and I may not have. She goes on vacation in a remote resort in Mexico. She goes with her husband. When she goes there, they're celebrating one of their friends' birthdays. 50th birthday, husband is 47. Sheryl Sandberg's husband, 47. He gets up in the morning and he goes to the treadmill. When he goes to the treadmill to work out in the gym, it's a remote island. It's a remote resort. He gets on the treadmill and he begins to run. When he begins to run, he has an irregular heartbeat. When he has an irregular heartbeat, he falls off the treadmill, he hits his head and he begins to bleed. If you and I are at a normal gym, there are other people around, they can call the ambulance, they can call the police and get taken care of. This was a remote location. For 2 hours, that man bled in his own pool of blood. When they got there, they took him to the hospital. When they took him to the hospital, when they got treatment eventually, they're waiting in the ER room like many of us have for our loved ones. And we hear that very, very dangerous and very scary voice from the doctor when he comes and he says, "I'm sorry. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't save him." Sheryl Sandberg said, "I was left with my husband gone and 2 children to raise on my own." She said, "I'm the leader of an organization that is multinational, a multi-billion-dollar institution, and I could not fathom how do I continue with life." You see, money, when you go through these difficulties, money may not help you as much. You're just the same. Ask the person who's suffering from cancer. Whether you're a millionaire or billionaire or otherwise, you're still suffering. At that point in time, she said, "I cannot move forward." She reached out to her network and she reached out to someone in particular to give her advice. People who you and I may not have access to. Professor Adam Grant at the University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School. He's written a very famous book called Originals and Others. He's written a book with Sheryl Sandberg. She said, "Adam, can you please tell me what I can do? I cannot cope with this difficulty. Why did I have to go through this? I lost my husband young. I have these 2 children to take care of. Why me? What can I do from a scientific perspective to cope with this difficulty, with this adversity?" He looked back at her and he said one word: gratitude. Gratitude, as we would call shukr or thankfulness. Gratitude? She said, "Are you serious? I've just lost my husband. Are you serious?" He said, "Imagine for a moment that your husband was driving the car and your 2 children were in the back seat. And he gets in an accident, goes off the side of the road, he dies and your 2 children die." It's a stark reality. He said, if there's anything from the psychology and the science perspective that can help you, it is to be grateful for what you had. Be grateful for the moments that you had with your husband. Be grateful that your children are still there. I tell you, I was in London last year. I met one of the sisters who was the happiest sister I've ever met in my life. Happiest person I've ever met in life. It was at a charity gala dinner. They were fundraising for blood cancer. She was someone who was paraplegic from the neck down. She was totally handicapped from the neck down in a wheelchair because she had been in an accident and she had lost her family. She was the only one who was there and she was fully handicapped from that accident. But I tell you, she was truly happy. And she said that I focus my attention on the beauty in life. I focus my attention on the beautiful time I had with my family. I focus my attention on the moments I had with them, the joyous moments. And I focus on the fact that I'm still here and I'm still alive. And yes, from the neck down, I can't move, but from the neck up, my thoughts are mine. I am thankful to my Lord and my Creator. The entire perspective shifts when you and I understand gratitude, which is the solution to the problem of why me. We understand why when Sayyida Zainab, when she's standing in front of Yazid and he says that Allah did this to your family, she says, "What did you find?" And she says in response, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I saw nothing but beauty. Allahu Akbar. Sayyida Zainab, you lost your brother. You lost Abu Fadl Abbas. You lost Ali Akbar. She realized when it came to the question of evil, that evil that existed on the plains of Karbala, that was the shar that the Quran calls the shar, that is created by man, that was created by Yazid. That evil was created by Umar ibn Sa'ad. That evil was created by those people who thought that their values were more important than Islam. Sayyidah Zainab never blamed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for her loss. Rather, she found beauty. Same with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, Sayyid al-Shuhada. Not a single moment in time did he ever for a moment think that evil exists, therefore God does not exist. He said evil is the creation of man. And this is a test for me to reach my culmination and max. Shar is from Yazid, man-made. And trials are to make us the best of creation, to bring the best out in us. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam on the plains of Karbala, he says a statement at the last moment after he's about to leave this world in the physical form. He says, Ilahi qad wafayta ufu bi'ahdik. Oh my Lord, my Creator, I have been loyal to my promise. Now you fulfill your promise. Allahu Akbar. I have done my job. Now you fulfill your job. We are here to commemorate Sayyid al-Shuhada. Sayyid al-Shuhada, whose one mission was to establish the halal of Muhammad on this earth and establish what the Sharia of Muhammad was on this earth, that the good remains good and the bad remains bad. Yazid had taken society into the opposite direction. He had made the halal of Muhammad haram and the haram of Muhammad halal. At that point in time, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam rose and he never questioned Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the extent that he lost his 6-month-old child. We are here to commemorate the 10th of Sayyid al-Shuhada. For the next few moments, give your tears to Sayyid al-Shuhada and his family. We are told that on the night after the tragedy of Karbala, some water reached the tents. I don't know how this water got there. They say it came. When this water came, it was a tremendous tragedy. They say Sayyidah Zainab got the water. I was in the presence of Ayatollah Hafiz Bashir al-Najafi. He says, you know what the musibah of Ahlul Bayt was after Karbala, after Ashura? He says Sayyidah Zainab went to look for the children. When she went to look for the children, it was a very dark night. And Sayyidah Zainab couldn't see the craters in the ground. So she would run after one child and she would fall on the ground and trip on the ground. One after the other, Sayyidah Zainab would fall over and over again, looking after every single child of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam's camp. Ajrukum ala Allah. They say when the water got there, Sayyidah Zainab began to distribute the water. When she began to distribute the water amongst the children, she brought the water to Sukaina bint al-Hussein, the daughter of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. At that point in time, Sakina says, my aunt Zainab, can you please tell me why you have given me this water first amongst all the children? At that moment, Bibi Zainab salamullah alayhi says, my dear daughter, I gave you water because you are the youngest of the children. Sakina took the water. She went into the maqtal. When she went into the maqtal, Sayyidah Zainab said, Sakina, where are you going? She said, my aunt Zainab, you said the youngest get water first. My 6-month-old brother Ali Asghar, he didn't get any water. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrum. There's a final narration. I won't disturb you and trouble you too much. There's a final narration that I have heard from the ulama of Karbala. They say that when Sayyidah Zainab got the water, she took the water and she gave it to Bibi Sakina. When she gave the water to Bibi Sakina said, my aunt Zainab, why did you give me this water? She said, my child, because you are the most thirsty. Bibi Sakina ran into the maqtal in the battlefield, but she went a different direction. Sayyidah Zainab said, Sakina, where are you going? Bibi Sakina got to one body that did not have a head, and she said a line that breaks the heart. She got to the body and she said, Baba, I brought you water. Baba, I brought you water. I was finally able to get water. I didn't have any before. You were so thirsty. Your daughter has brought you water. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. معتم يا حسين يا حسين
يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين عزیز و فاطمہ کے گود کے پالے کا دسواں ہے رہا جو بے کفن دشتے بلا میں اس کا دسواں ہے عزیز و فاطمہ کے گود کے پالے کا دسواں ہے جسے امت نے مارا بے خطا یہ اس کا ماتم ہے دیا سر جس نے خود راہ خدا میں اس کا دسواں ہے عزیز و فاطمہ کے گود کے پالے کا دسواں ہے رہی جلتی زمین پر لاش اس سرور کی مجلس ہے حرم جس کے پھنسے کنبے جہاں میں اس کا دسواں ہے عزیز و فاطمہ کے گود کے پالے کا دسواں ہے جسے بچپن میں چکی پیس کر پالا تھا زہرا نے محب و اہل بیت مصطفیٰ میں اس کا دسواں ہے محب و اہل بیت مصطفیٰ میں اس کا دسواں ہے عزیز و فاطمہ کے گود کے پالے کا دسواں ہے ہوئے قیدی حرم جس کے جو ہے 10ویں محرم کو عزادارو اراؤ خاک سر پر اس کا دسواں ہے عزیز و فاطمہ کے گود کے پالے کا دسواں ہے اراؤ خاک سر پر اور اپنا پیٹ کر سینہ تمہارے واسطے جو کام آیا اس کا دسواں ہے عزیز و فاطمہ کے گود کے پالے کا دسواں ہے رہا جو بے کفن دشتے بلا میں اس کا دسواں ہے رحم اللہ من کر سورۃ مبارکۃ الفاتحہ بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم الحمد للہ ایاک نعبد و ایاک نستعین
Sant. Thank you, Uncle Hussein. Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum. Just a quick announcement. Inshallah, our next program will be on Thursday, September 2nd, which will be commemorating the Shahadat of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam and the 20th of Shohoda Karbala. Inshallah, that program will be in person and also online as well. Registration reminders will go out for those of you who will be joining us in person. Like during the 12 days of Muharram, we will, certainly check for COVID vaccinations, and only vaccinated people will be permitted to enter the center, inshallah. Also, let's recite Surah Fatiha for all the marhumeens and our families, and also around the world. Surah Al-Fatiha. Let's also recite Dua Shifa for Sean Somji Bax, who underwent surgery earlier today and is currently in recovery, and also for those that are sick in our families and around the world. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Amma yujibul mustarra iza da'ahu wa yakshifu su. 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 Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. We'll now conclude the ziyarat by Jamil and Zain Ali Jafar. Jamil, bismillah.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدتي نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين، خصوصا سيد أبي الفضل عباس وأختك زينب وأم كلثوم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا مولى وابن مولاي. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء. السلام عليك يا سلطان يا أبا الحسن علي بن موسى الرضا. كن شفينا وشفي والدينا في يوم الجزاء ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. الأمان الأمان الأمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن. السلام عليك يا كعبة الإيمان. أجل الله تعالى فرجت وسخر الله تعالى مخرجت وظهور العم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
اللهم شريك صلواتك عليه وعلى آله في هذه الساعة في كل ساعة ويانا حافظا وقائدا نحسنا وتويلا علينا حتى تسكنه وكاته وتدعو فيها طويلا رحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Great job, Zain Ali, mashallah. Mu'mineen, that concludes our program for tonight. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Khuda hafiz.